Today we will be screening 2 films, followed by a discussion with our distinguished guests from Kahnawake, and also, I hope, with many of you in the audience. I want to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous territory. Concordia recognizes the Kanien'kehá nation as the custodians of the lands and waters upon which we gather today, in person and virtually. Tiohtià:ke, or Montreal, has long been a gathering place for many First Nations. But yesterday, we learned that Tiohtià:ke is only part of the traditional Mohawk name for this place. Tiohtià:ke is a fuller expression, which I learned yesterday means the place where Indigenous people broke apart because they could not gather here anymore because of European settlement and colonization. With this history and all the implied and very real politics in mind, and as the person welcoming everyone today, I wish to express my respect for the past, present, and future Indigenous people and nations within Montreal and beyond, but especially today, the Ganienkeh. And it is the Ganienkeh, their art, their words, their worldview, and resilience that is the focus of the book we are launching this week. The Mohawk Warrior Society, and here I'm borrowing a bit from the publisher's website, features foundational writings by prolific visual artist and polemicist Louis Karuhyuk Hall, who was born in 1918 and died in 1993. In the new book, you will find a reprint of Karuhyuk's landmark 1979 publication, The Warrior's Handbook, as well as some illustrations of this prolific artist's work. And as an art historian, I have to say this particularly thrills me because it is extremely difficult to get reproductions of these important historic works. And as an oral historian, the book thrills me as well because it contains new oral history by key figures of the Mohawk revival in the 1970s. It tells the story of the Warriors' famous flag, which is all featured on the cover. Sorry, it's not featured on the cover of the book, but one of Hall's works are featured on the cover of the book, but it's in the book. Also, their armed occupation of Ganienkeh in 1974, and the role of their constitution, the Great Peace, which we heard a lot about yesterday. We learned the story of how the Ganienkeh Longhouse became one of the most militant resistance groups in North America, gaining international attention with the Oka crisis of 1990. This oral history is complemented by a Mohawk history timeline from colonization to the present, a glossary, this is huge, a glossary of Mohawk political philosophy, and a new map of Iroquois in Mohawk language. Through this book, the Mohawk warriors tell their own story with their own voices, and in so doing, I believe, serve as an example and inspiration for our generation and future generations struggling against the environmental, cultural, and social devastation that is around us everywhere we turn today. I'm thrilled to tell you that you can buy the book. Behind this screen, there's actually a full book display, and Claude will be happy to facilitate your purchase. There is an English version, and I'm not sure if there are still French copies. There are a few French copies, which has otherwise almost sold out in less than a week after the release, which is amazing. So I would like to really thank our visitors who are joining us today, both in person and virtually, from Kahnawake and the larger Mohawk Nation. We are very honored to have you with us. And we're grateful for your time because something, I knew this, but it really came through yesterday, is just how many struggles, how many battles you are fighting, how many big challenges you have. So your time is very precious to us. Thank you for being here. Now I'd like to invite Philippe Blouin to introduce our guests. Philippe is one of the editors and the core coordinator of the Mohawk Warrior Society. He writes, translates, and studies political anthropology and philosophy. His current PhD research at McGill seeks to understand and share the teachings of the Deohade, or the two-row wampum, to build decolonial alliances. His work has been published in Liaison, Stasis, and Polar. He wrote an afterword to George Sorel's Reflections on Violence and has translated several books in French, including Jackie Wang's Carceral Capitalism and Sabu Koso's Radiation and Revolution. So Philippe, did you want to come up? Okay.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, and thank you for the force space and everyone that's making this happen. We're so happy of all this incredible setup and this opportunity to share the work that we've done for nearly 6 years to get this book out. And we're happy to have several Ganienkeh guests in the room. However, several other guests could not make it. Actually, 3 of the most central figures in this book who told their stories through their testimonies of how the Rotisken'rhakéhte, the Warrior Society, was reestablished in the 1970s. That's Digarundege, Ganasaragon, and Aterunyatagu. Well, it seems like the 3 of them have COVID right now. And so we're wishing them the best and that they'll come through it without any harm. However, we do have Ganienkeh Rotisken'rhakéhte in the room. Ganienkeh is part of the co-editor of the book, as well as Matt Peterson from New York City. I think Malik Razamni, who's in Beirut right now, must be following us online, so he might say a few words at some point. We're also very happy to have from Kahnawake, Garanata, who's just there, who made the words of introduction. There's a Garaguine also from Kahnistensera, who just showed up. And there's, I'm sorry, I don't know your indigenous name, so I'm gonna use the Jackie and Brandon, and they're Brandon's daughter, I think, and Mike, also Brandon's friend, that came from Aguasasne. So we're really happy to have them here. So we'll present the movies. I think Cynthia will say a few words about them, and then we'll have just a casual discussion about what it says. And this is the first time that it's screened in Montreal, at least. This movie, Mohawk Nation. It's the only images that have come from the reoccupied land of Ganienkeh. It was made in 1978, so we're really happy to screen it here. Thank you.
Merci, Philippe. Yes, so I just wanted to say that Concordia's Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling and the Department of Art History are co-hosting this event in collaboration with ForceSpace. And in case I forget later, as I forgot yesterday, I really want to thank ForceSpace, the whole team at ForceSpace, for being so flexible, so welcoming, making magic happen as you always do. Thank you so much, Anna and team. And we'd also like to thank Concordia's Faculty of Fine Arts and the Office of Research for supporting this publication and to this week's events. So yes, as Philippe said, Mohawk Nation is a very important documentary that was produced. It was filmed in 1974, and it was, I guess it premiered in 1978, directed by Alan Siegel, but it addresses a very important piece of history. A group of Mohawks reoccupied a part of their ancestral land in 1974 and proclaimed it Ganienkeh. So the movie Mohawk Nation what's significant about it, it was made by the occupants themselves, the occupiers themselves, although occupy is an interesting word when it's, their territory, in collaboration with Third World Newsreel crew, who described the film as an intimate portrait of a people reclaiming their roots and searching for a better life. Ganienkeh symbolizes the reestablishment of the indigenous way of life, which is, again, this is from the filmmaker's website, an attempt to live and work together according to Mohawk beliefs and customs. In this film, audiences witness the Ganienkeh lifestyle, the reestablishment of their identity, their freedom and dignity as a sovereign nation, and the re-flourishing of the Mohawk people. And today, the Ganienkeh community continues to protect their independence and have become a self-sufficient nation. So we'll be very excited to watch this film with you. It's 45 minutes long. I did want to mention that we have coffee and food, which you're welcome to help yourself to at any time, but we will be taking a break between films. We'll wait to have our discussion at the end of seeing both films. And the second film, I'll describe it later, but just so you know, for timing purposes, the second film is 22 minutes. So there'll be time to get snacks. But if you do need to come and go, it's totally understood, no problem. Just feel free to leave. Don't feel weird about having to go if you've got a class or something of that nature. So I think, Doug, we are ready to screen Mohawk Nation. Thank you. Okay, amazing. Looking forward to our discussion about this film. I will say that this film is actually rather hard to come by, and Philippe and I discovered that there was only one copy in Montreal, so we got Concordia to purchase another copy. So if you happen to be a Concordia student or faculty member, I think also alumni, you can watch the film at any time. How does that help people who are not Concordia professors and students and so forth? Well, I also have, as a gift to thank our guests from Kahnawake, I have a copy of the film for you to take home and to share with one another. And maybe there'll be more viewing parties in the future, and you're welcome to come back and see it here at any time also. So we will now take a 15-minute break. You have time to help yourself to coffee and snacks. Also, Claude is waiting if you would like to purchase a copy of the Mohawk Warrior Society. So we'll start again at 20 after 2. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're about ready to get started again. Give everybody a minute to find their seat. Okay, so welcome back to the second day of our celebration of the publication of the Mohawk Warrior Society. And in honor of that important publication, we're showing a second film now, quite different film. This is called Rose. And I've actually seen 2 different dates for the film. I have 2019 in one place and 2022 in another place. So it's either very, very new or pretty new. So this is a narrative film that is based on historical facts. It was written and directed by Roxanne Whitebean, who is the member of the Kanien'kehá Nation. And she could not be with us today, but her mom, Sheila, is with us, Sheila Whitebean. So thank you very much for joining us, Sheila. So Rose is the story of a 16-year-old pregnant Indigenous girl pulled from her community and placed in a church to be overseen in her last weeks of pregnancy. When she delivers her child, it will be taken from her and put in a settler Canadian home by decree of an Indian agent, Angus McBurn. Rose harbors a secret and will not tell anyone the identity of the baby's father, not even her family. It is later revealed that the father of her child, I wonder if I should say this. I'm not going to, even though you could read this online. But anyway, I'm not going to say any more. So yes, this film is 22 minutes, and I think we are ready to go. Doug, enjoy. So it's a very moving film. That's the first time I've seen it. I know it might be hard for from people from Kahnawake to start speaking after that. So maybe I could just invite people from the audience who maybe feel less pressure on themselves at this moment, just to give some responses to the film. Either this film or the previous film that we saw, Mohawk Nation. I think something that's really important after, sharing this kind of material is to speak about it, not just to walk away with one's own thoughts, but to share in what we've heard and learned together. So do I have anybody in the audience who can start us off with some thoughts or some comments? I'm sorry. Oh.
Thank you. Yeah, that was so powerful to watch. Oh, I don't know if this is working, but hold it. Is that okay? Okay, yeah. So powerful to watch such an important story to see, and really incredible characters as well. I was really moved, and yeah, just it was, I kind of stumbled into this room today. I wasn't expecting to be here, but I'm really grateful to have been given the opportunity to see that and get to see something I've learned about actually put into a story. You can tell that so much care and attention to detail was like so many the imagery and like the different shots. You could just tell that every moment in that movie meant something, and that there was a lot of just care behind it. At least that was my impression. So I just feel very grateful to have been able to be here and with all of you and learn. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I don't know. Pass it along.
Can I?
Yeah. It's quite high.
All right.
Yeah, I think it. I don't know. I'm trying to think about the relationship between the two movies, and well, actually, it's pretty much the same time period, and I think we have to be mindful that what the Rotisken'rhakéhte, the warriors, and all the militant revivalist movements did in the 60s and 70s. It was directly, linked to resistance against what was being put against the children, the children that were scooped, and many traditionals. Well, especially Longhouse people were, targeted as non-Christians for these scoops, residential schools, and abuse. Many of them had to go in hiding or always move around Turtle Island, especially with Mohawks and Kahnawake who were working in iron work, building those skyscrapers in all the big towns across North America. So they always had to stay on the move and escape from really these what they called the truant officers that were actually, it's in the current lawsuit that we spoke a bit about yesterday against the Royal Victoria Hospital and McGill University in this big development project, and with these allegations of unmarked graves on those grounds. There's been an investigation from the part of the Mohawk mothers, and lots of people helped doing this investigation, trying to find connections of how Indigenous children were also, taken from their families and used as for medical experiments, and especially traditional Longhouse people. And well, things that we stumbled on, looking into all those archival records, are just things that, it's supposed to be common knowledge or it's official, but people just don't know about it, and we don't talk about it. for instance, in the amendments that were made in 1951 to the Indian Act, they had a whole set of provisions that were targeting children who wouldn't attend school, actually, who would, miss school or refuse to attend to a residential school. And after 3 days that they wouldn't attend, they would be considered immediately guilty, without even a trial, guilty of juvenile delinquency. And back then, in the 50s, the children were actually sent to prison. Juvenile delinquents, actually the biggest prison in Quebec, which was Saint-Vincent-de-Paul, like 1/4 of its population were juveniles, actually. So not attending school, residential school, for 3 days, you would be declared juvenile delinquent and immediately institutionalized in prisons, psychiatric wards, reform schools, training schools. You had all these institutions all across the country, and those were direct attacks on the traditional segments of Indigenous societies, which refused to convert to Christianity, which refused to convert to the white man's ways. So I think it's important to, keep in mind that the warrior revivalist movement was very much also dedicated to protect the children and allow them to be, raised in traditional ways and not being stolen by the church and, subjected to all this abuse.
Go ahead, Malik, if you wanted to unmute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to see those.
Can't hear you, Malik.
Can you hear me?
Just don't hear you.
Can you hear me? You can't hear me?
Yes, now yes.
Okay, thank God. No, I'm always worried with the internet here. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to see those two films. My comments are more related to both, but particularly the first film. There were two quotes that really stood out for me. The first was when he talks about how people see the reservation as a kind of a ghetto, and in some ways it is. But then at the other hand, it's also the only space where Native people in America can potentially, not always, but potentially even exercise their sovereignty. That quote really stuck out for me. And then the second quote, which also stuck out to me, and I think they're connected, that was in the beginning, but then towards the end, he made this very interesting point where he says this big misconception is that Native people fought with each other. But that's not the right framework to understand it. It's that the American project of assimilation and annihilation works on so many different levels that it's not just merely about co-opting people against each other, but a system that absorbs and brings people in a variety of ways, and kind of, so it's not even division, but more like this kind of thing that's annihilating and consuming on so many different levels. And that was part of the reason, I think, why Matt and I were interested in exploring the reservations, because to my mind, they're the only place where that fight against that project of Native annihilation actually happens on many different levels. So for example, in terms of land, the way that under situations of Native governance is the only time where the land itself has any kind of sovereignty. And it's places where the forefront of the struggle for the rights of the land against a situation where the land itself is weaponized against Native people, as we see obviously with land that's where there's flooding, or the annihilation of the buffalo, or the power plants, electrical grids that are nearby, that are cancerous and poison the water, etc., are often located near reservations. So the fight for the land to stop land being turned against people as a weapon happens on reservations, and we saw that the most clearly, of course, with Standing Rock. Standing Rock is the clearest example of that. But it's also goes beyond that. I mean, it's also it's what a lot of people misunderstand is these kinds of silent killers, as they say, someone in our film speaks about from Akwesasne. He says, Roger actually, he says that the America produces these silent killers. And oftentimes we think of violence as just being about a gun, being shot, being killed in an outright way. But I mean, the high rates of native mortality due to health concerns, due to TB, tuberculosis, as they spoke about in the movie, today with COVID-19, the deaths because of alcoholism, right, and car crashes are also part of these kinds of silent killers that Native people have to deal with. And we can see the similarities between struggles on reservations surrounding these issues. One of the places we worked in was Pine Ridge. And on Pine Ridge, very similar to what they were discussing in Akwesasne in the film, there was a town called White Clay, which served alcohol, and alcohol is not allowed on the reservation. And so there is today a Native struggle to close down the bars in White Clay, which are in Nevada, but basically exist for only one purpose, which is to sell alcohol to the Native people on Pine Ridge against the rules and governance of Pine Ridge itself. And most of their people who are customers are not, they're alcoholics. They're not casual alcohol drinkers, and people have lost family members and relatives because of White Clay. So again, we see Pine Ridge at the forefront of a struggle against one of the silent killers of the American kind of project that was pointed out. And I think, if anything, Ganienkeh was an attempt to preserve or to emphasize the best part of the reservation, which is the ability for natives to be sovereign on their own land and to practice their traditional ways of life. But in order to accomplish that project, they had to leave the actual physical reservation, where they were up against the forces, different forces kind of representing the Canadian and US government. And I would also finally argue that that the missing Native woman, as that we know about today, as well as the project of the scoop of the 1960s, are also part of, again, these kind of silent killers of Native culture and Native life. Alcoholism, disease, and environmental destruction, and all the rest of it are part of these kinds of silent killers that basically disappear Native people. Once they get swallowed into the American project and adopted, it's like they were extracted from something that they were. And that is a kind of a death, in a way. And there's also, of course, outright death. So hopefully I'm not too rambled here, but I think that was something interesting in those two quotes in the movies. I think are interesting. Right. So someone is saying a reservation is not right. I'm quoting the film. In the film, he says Louis Hall makes that claim, and so I'm just simply quoting Louis Hall's statement in the film about Native sovereignty. And anyway, so that's basically those are the observations that I had, or that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
I'd like to say something. When we like to call our territories territory. The word reserve, there's certain trigger words that make us uneasy, and because like he had outlined, that there's these silent killers that are within our community that have been placed there. Well, first of all, tribes, nations, when we say the word nation, it's been generalized like that, but we don't have that name, and a nation is built of people with common interests and common goals, and we're a people. So it's something that we have to make an everyday language even within our people first, but that's been put into our community. The word tribe, I believe the only group other than Ngwehungwe people that are called tribes is monkeys. The other thing is, when you call our territory reservations, reserves are usually built for animals or kept for animals. And so those things are just some basic run-of-the-mill, everyday language that helps to instill us from disappearing, helps to not know who we are, helps to not, it doesn't help us, but it's like a direct hit on us every day, calling ourselves nations or tribes or such. And First Nations, we're First Nations of this. Even that, to me, I don't like to call myself First Nation. That's something, a term that someone else put upon me, and it became regular. A lot of people who are Ungwehungwe people say, oh, I'm First Nations, or I'm Indigenous, or I'm Aboriginal. The word Aboriginal, like you're abnormal to the normal, you know, like we're not human or something. So that's just one of those silent killers that I take out of what he just said. But along the lines of fighting against one another, like the character who's the agent, what was her name in the movie? No, not Rose, Elizabeth Liz. That aspect has been put into our communities, and they pay those people handsomely, and they create an illusion of power within our communities. And people who are further off and don't really have a grasp at closely who they are, believe that these band councils that are paid handsomely to, like, it's like they're infiltrators, or they're what do you call them, moles, to put in our community to silently disperse us. And so when it comes to land happening, like the country of Canada is constantly going to this band council and asking them to sign things on behalf of the people. And then when that happens, the people within our communities rebel. And then we're looked at like we're militant people, that we're harmful people, that we just want to create some damage and havoc. And that's not the case. When you say the word warrior society, it doesn't necessarily mean militant. It means there just wasn't any other word for warrior. We don't have a word for warrior. In Kanien'kehá, we call it Rotisken'rhakéhte, but that's more, we carry, or we're protecting the earth. It's not, we're protecting our people and the land that we live on. So I like his point about these silent killers, because I never had that word put on there. Like that's a good way to label it, to make other people understand what is essentially happening to us. Because every day there's something, we turn on the radio station in our own community, and they're spewing only the band councils what they want. And when I was a little girl, they had the radio station in Kahnawake, and they used to have a noon talk show. And they used to say what the matter was at hand, and people were allowed to call in, and they were allowed to give their opinions or ask questions about it. They totally don't do that anymore. They screen all the calls, so it's all like mamsy-pamsy little dinky questions, instead of questions that get right to the matter and make the community think. And my mom, she's a great thinker. She's more shy and doesn't like to public speak or whatever. So at home, I would come home from lunch and she'd be like, here, ask this question. She'd make me call the radio station. The other way of communicating with the rest of your community was going to a band council meeting. But in my eyes, by going to one of their meetings, I was consenting their power. So we don't do that. And then when something passes and all of a sudden our police force is against our people, oh, well, you didn't come to the meeting, you didn't know that we were gonna do this? Well, yeah, but I don't condone that. So, you know, they put in a silent killer that is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Either you have gone out of the canoe, if you understand that, gone out of the canoe and jumped in the ship instead. And then if you stayed in the canoe and you didn't fight for it, it's just a crazy system that has totally been a silent killer within us. So I appreciate those words from him, because it gives me a new standing ground to fight.
Yeah, maybe we can let Sean speak. Sean Sager. Have to open your mic, I think. Your mic is closed. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
There you go, Kanien'kehá. Yeah, just on the first film, it brought back a lot of memories, almost made me cry at times. I grew up there as a young lad. I moved there in '75 and was there till mid '77. So it was nice seeing all those old faces that have gone. Actually, now a few of them. Yeah, Kahnawake is hardly ever mentioned in all these conversations, but we were there. There was probably 24 or more men that were there, and we still have men that live there today. And actually, just to bring up Louis Hall, if you could see the medallion in the back here, Louis painted this. It's an original. He had one here for the men at Kahnawake, and there's one in Ganienkeh, and there's also one in Kahnawake, I believe. So I guess I'm the custodial of this, and I'm very proud of it. It was good to get to know him. We had many conversations. I lived in the one where they showed it because I was a single guy. I lived in the cook shack, I guess we called it. There was upstairs, there's all kinds of apartments. So all of us single guys all lived up there. But we come down in the morning and we had a huge cook stove. I would throw 2 loaves of bread on it that we could make it, and Louis would make the, as he calls it, oatmeal. Because not a lot of people like getting up eating their sticky oatmeal every morning. But it was an adventure in my life, and it's something I cherish forever. Getting to know these people, and yeah, it was nice. I thank you very much. I'd like to get a copy of that as well if I somehow taken me back to when I was a kid. It's a lot of fun, and we've been through all the skirmishes over the years. Us guys here as well. Whenever they call from Akwesasne, where I was there, down at Loran's, or different places, or going back to Ganienkeh when we were needed. But that's the thing about the warriors that I see, as we call ourselves warriors. A lot of times you see everybody fatigues and such like that. Well, we do need that. But when that situation is over, that you've dealt with it, you just return back home, and you come back and you're just a father and a grandfather, uncle, or elder that you could speak to somebody if they need to be. So that's what warrior means to me. It's just when you need the protection, you put that on, you protect your people, you protect your land. And when it's done with, and when it's over with, you come back to just being a community member, a family member in the Longhouse. That's all I have to say. I appreciate that film. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Sean. I think we should, I know how we could do it, but we'd have to bring copies in Kahnawake for sure of the book and the movie too, so we can try to arrange that.
I think the first thing is about the silent killers. There is another expression that I prefer, that is slow death, because when it's silent, we don't give it name. And I think it's important to give it name. And slow death, it's a term already of this other sociology, Laurent Berlin, where it's the condition of why Afro-descendant societies have obesity and they die of alcoholism, for example, in America. And I think it's capitalism in all its senses, wearing us off all the time and faster in certain communities. But the slow death is always present, and it's there. Especially when we think of disappearance and when we think of all the hidden or silent violence, but in reality is also the continuation of death present. And that comes into, I think, my second of naming things. When we think of the 60 scoop, we have to, when I look at the numbers, it's like one of the biggest scams of human trafficking that I think that we have into with the Catholic Church and and other churches also, and the government, because the numbers, they're absurd. They are like in the orders of thousands, so yeah, naming things, I think also is for us to realize the past that is still present. It's very important. I don't know what you think about it.
Well, among our people, there's hardly anybody I know that didn't go through something like that. And so the main thing was that the idea was to completely get rid of us. And it was, there's a word that's being used by the Jewish people called the Holocaust. And they say that they suffered the greatest Holocaust, but the one we suffered and are still suffering is of over 150 million of us. And but we shouldn't use that word that is ascribed to the Jewish people. We call it the Yakiyasehtu. That means they wanted to completely annihilate us, as if we had never even existed. That was the plan, and still is the plan. So, you know, they're trying to hide us, and we're still trying to maintain our existence. The numbers of us that are alive here today, which is far smaller than what we once were. So I think that what Louis did, he understood that. He understood what we were going through, and it was hard. But he did everything he could to make us aware of that with writing and with painting and with telling stories and just living that life that he dedicated himself to show us. He set the greatest example ever to put himself out there, to be wherever things were happening. He was there. And so he was always personally involved in everything. And I think it's important for us to see it and make our own word for what has happened to us. Trying to hide our existence, which is still happening now, because right now we're going through so much trying to find our children at McGill, the Royal Victoria Hospital, and there's not a single word about this in the newspapers for you to know what we're doing and what we're trying to do. It's all about those children that we have, that have been taken from us, that have been experimented on, that have died. And each one of us has family. Either we lost family or we had to fight for them. And it happened in my own family, and I can't even talk about it. So, and here we are, a people that never stole anything, and look at what happened to us. We're murdered, and we're downplayed, and nobody knows about us. Nobody knows our true history and who we are, our existence. So, you know, we are still fighting. We're doing it. It's in us to do it. That's what creation put in us. We can't stop. We can never stop. And that's the design that nature made and put us in there. That's why we're here today, all of us. We go out of our way and we get there some. I remember years ago, I'm going back 50, 60 years ago, we had to go somewhere. We put our money together, drive there, go to wherever we had to go to help somebody or to help with something that was happening there, and we would spend our time there, and they would help us, feed us, and so on. And that's the way we did it then. And there's so many, don't even know of these people who did it. They're all gone now. Like Richard Oakes was the one that started the American Indian movement, and then he helped take over Alcatraz. I remember he was there, and he said, okay, they were trying to go onto the island, and the water was kind of rough, and the boat that was supposed to take them from this boat onto the island, it didn't quite make it. So he said, what the heck, let's just jump in and swim for it. And that's what they did. And they got onto the island, they took it. And we had it for quite a while. But nobody knows about him, what he did, and what so many. I heard Floyd Westerman singing. He had some fantastic songs. And nobody ever hears about it. Nobody knows who he is. He's been gone. And so many of our people just turned our lives over to the movement. And then when the movement was over, nobody knew anything about us. But in my case, I was blacklisted for, right to this moment, going back to my early 20s. That's a long time, that's and that's what they did to us. So I just wanted to say that. And then we had Mad Bear. I don't think you ever heard of Mad Bear. He did a lot, especially up at Six Nations, and he traveled all over the world. He told the world what was going on here, and he was working on the ships. Nobody has heard of him, but he was fantastic. And these are all people, and you don't even know about him, and nobody even heard of Kanien'kehá. But now we're hoping that you will not just hear of Kanien'kehá, you'll hear of the struggle and what one person was able to do. But he never did it for himself. He did it with us, and all of us pitched in, and we all did what we could, because we all have something to give, no matter how unimportant it might seem. But when something came up, something happened, we would go there. And there might be, you don't know, you might know something. A small child might know something. But each person was very important, and we all contributed something together. So I think that the movement is starting again. This is what's happening now. We are awakened by bringing this information out. The book, I took the book home yesterday. Well, my grandchildren, I have great-grandchildren too. Oh my God, they started looking at it. Where do I get this? Where do I get this? And they took it to school, and they said they want, the children at school want to have this book. So our own children want this information, and we don't have the information because we never had a book out about him. We just had it by word of mouth. But now we have something, and it'll be on everybody's, in everybody's house. So, we need to do this for ourselves. We need to do it for everybody to know that we are going to survive, because that's what nature intended for us. And we just need support for it. We need people to stand with us, because we are so small in numbers now. If you go back to just how many of our children they took, I won't tell you about. Well, I'll give you one story. This was one that I was involved in 1967. I was working here in the city. I had an apartment, and I was working at the Expo 67. Anyway, there's a girl from up north, and she was here in the city alone. She was a Cree, and she needed some help. I said, okay. So she had twins, so she ended up staying with me, and I helped take care of her. And then this other girl came from the north, and she looked like she was ready to have the baby. I said, when are you due? And she says, I was due 2 weeks ago. I said, where are you staying? She says, I'm staying with the should I say it? The Salvation Army. Anyway, that was right around the corner from where I lived on Pepper. Anyway, she called me and she was crying on the telephone. She says, I'm in the hospital. I've just had a baby. It's a boy. And it was at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which was nearby. And I went there. And she was crying. And I said, what is the matter? She said, well, when I was in that when I was in the Salvation Army, I signed something like that girl did. And what she thought she was signing was they would just take care of her. What she didn't know was she had signed away the baby. And she told me she never wanted to give the baby away. So I said, okay, when are they taking the baby away? And she said, tomorrow. So I went home, I made calls to the Salvation Army. I said, this girl wants to keep her baby. Well, that's too late. She signed it away. We have a family, a nice family for her, for the boy. Anyway, so I called her and I said, I'll be over there tomorrow and around noon. Anyway, just do what I tell you. So my sister and I, she went in, she had a car. So I told my sister, just park in front of the hospital. So I went inside and I walked up to the second floor where this girl was. I gave her some clothes to wear and I said, put them on and get under the blanket and ask for your baby and just say you want to see him one more time before he's taken away. And I hid in the bathroom. So that's what she did. They brought the baby in and then the nurse left and I rushed out. I grabbed the baby and I said, follow me, and we went down these stairs. And then we ran across this lobby. And then my sister had the car running, and of course we got chased and my sister had to take off. Anyway, we took the baby to that little apartment, but then I figured they'll find me. So I went upstairs and there are two fellows I knew. And I said, would you mind taking care of this girl and this baby? I already have two babies in my house. It's crowded. I can't take care. Oh, of course. These were non-native and just really nice guys. They went and bought diapers and everything that she needed. And she hid there for about, I'd say maybe about 3 weeks. And then I finally took her out to Kahnawake. But while I was home, the police came to my door. I don't know how they discovered that it was me. They came in and they started looking at those two other babies and they've tried to take those two other ones away. And I said, no. And she says, whose babies are these? And I said, well, it's this girl, it's her baby. Well, they wanted proof. Otherwise, they were going to take those babies, or one of them anyway. They said, and the woman kept saying, where's my baby? The one from the Salvation Army. Where is my baby? I want my baby. Anyway, so we took her back out. We took her to Kahnawake, and I said, well, we've got to get her back up north, and we'll do that. We did finally get her back up north. She took a bus. She stopped somewhere before her reserve along the lake, and then she left the baby with somebody, and then she took she took a boat and went across. Went to see her village, and she told them that she had a baby, and almost the whole village came to get that baby. And that baby's name was Larry. She named him after the St. Lawrence River because she could see it from her room. And believe it or not, I eventually saw that boy, and the father saw me somewhere at something here. And he says, I want you to meet somebody. I said, who? So he brought him over. I said, you remember Larry? I couldn't believe it. I saw him about 50 years later. It was almost 50 years later that I saw him. But you see, that's how they took those babies. The mother would come out. She was in a daze. She'd just gone through delivery. And then they take the baby. And there's no way you can get it back. I know that. And there is a girl that's done, she actually has, and then of course, you know, they do other things to these girls too, sterilize them. And there's so many that were sterilized, didn't even know they were sterilized. Young girls too, 14, 15 years old. So there's a young girl, a woman, she's a Native woman, and she's a lawyer, and she's been fighting a class action suit. Now, she's found out more things about that plan that they had to sterilize us. And in my case, they were giving us birth control pills in the beginning. We're talking about a long time ago in the 60s. And it was, in my case, I started to get extremely sick, and my chest was covered with, it turned, there was veins coming out. And these were new, nobody else was using them. They were giving it to us. So I told a doctor about it, and he says, never ever take those again, because they'll kill you. It will kill you. So I went off that, and that's when I discovered that some of our women had died from that. So they were experimenting on us for that, the birth control pills, not just all these other things they were using on us. They were putting our children, our small children, through these IQ tests. And then if for some reason they would pick some of them and say, we want to do another IQ test on you. And those were the children that they would select, and they would take them away. Yeah, this is the truth. And if you really want to know what was done to us, you should read the, there's a lot, we put a whole lot of exhibits in our court case, and you can get them from the court. It's public. These are public documents. You want to know what they did to us, read them. But you'll never hear about it in the mainstream media. It's not in there. It's being deliberately not being covered. So what do? Maybe you have some ideas of what we should be doing to get people to know. At least that would help in some way to get this out, so that people will understand why we're fighting so hard for our children, why we've got this case in court for our babies, why we want to get them back, and why we want people to know what happened. Yes, it's sad, it's hard for us, but we have to do it for our own sake, and for the past, what happened to them, the present and the future. It has to be done. And that's why we're so dedicated to what we're doing.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sheila Whitebean, and my daughter is Roxanne. She made the film Rose. Like most of us sitting up here, our families have gone through everything. We've gone through residential school. We've gone through day school. We've gone through the 60s scoop and the millennium scoop. And it still continues on, as Kahnistensera said. We're always fighting to save ourselves and to save our children and to save our community. This film that Roxanne made, it's based on a true story, and I'm that child in that film. My mother went through that. Can you imagine, like a 15-year-old girl? She gets pregnant, she turns 16, she's still pregnant, 6 months to go, and she has her baby. She's 15 years old, and the first thing that she's told is something that comes natural to people, you know, with attraction and love. She's told that she did something terribly wrong. You're just a child still, you know, you're just transitioning into becoming an older person. And she's told that because she got pregnant, she did something wrong, really, really horribly wrong. And she's taken away from her family when she's in this state of pregnancy, and she doesn't know what to expect and what's gonna happen. She's taken away and she's put into a home for unwed pregnant mothers. And while she's in there, she's going through all this every day, you know, like trying to be forced to give up your child. You did this wrong, you need to do this, you need to do that. And she was raised as a Catholic person. So it didn't matter if you were a Longhouse or Catholic or anything. What mattered was that you were a Mohawk person or a Cree person. These things happen to you. So while she's in this place, they're trying to force her to give up her child. And then it comes to a point where I guess you're forced to sign those papers, like Kahnistensera said. They give you something to make you a little bit groggy and everything, and then you sign those papers. In the meantime, she's not telling who the father is, because if she does, he's going to be arrested. And he's going to serve time in prison, even as a young child himself. He's going to serve this time in prison because she's pregnant. They're not even given the chance to try to be parents. They have nobody to teach them to do that, because generation after generation, generation after before generation, when you go back to like 5-6 generations in their lifetime, in our lifetime, our people went through this. So my mother signed the papers for adoption. But if you noticed at the end, my Aunt Nancy was on there, and she was really like, I guess you could say, an activist, like these women here. She fought along with my great-grandmother to get me back. So I was one of the lucky ones. It didn't always happen that way, but I was one of the lucky ones where I was brought back home to my family. I don't know how they did it at that time. They were women. 2 women fighting to get me back. That's amazing that they were able to achieve that task, because a lot of people weren't. So, you know, I'm really grateful to my family for getting me back. Like Roxanne said, when this showed in Kahnawake, her film showed in Kahnawake, she said, just with me alone, I was that one baby. I had 6 children with my husband. We're still together. I had 6 children, and I have 20 grandchildren. So that's 27 people that would have disappeared from the community. That's horrendous to think of that, you know, like you're having a child and you're not even given the choice or the chance to decide to be parents. It was really, you know, it hits home for me every time I watch it. I've seen it a lot of times. It still triggers me, but I'm okay, you know, it's just part of it. But for my mother being like under all that pressure and everything, you know, then I was born and they took me away, and she went back home. For her, it ruined our relationship as mother and daughter. It really did, because I can't imagine what she went through at that time, and I understand where her decision is, but she was probably resentful towards me because she was placed in a hospital, and then when she did have me, or was about to have me, they were moving me all over Montreal with my mother. So she suffered a lot, you know, she suffered a lot to have me. So I understand that part, but it did ruin our relationship as mother and daughter. So that's one of the effects that we have, you know, that's one of the effects that happens to us. But I'm so glad that Roxanne made this movie, because I'm not the only one. I'm sure everybody sitting here had somebody that was taken away. It's not fair. It has to stop. It has to stop sometime. But she's really courageous to make these movies, Roxanne. She always tries to make it to show something, to bring awareness about like what happened to us, what's happening to us, or what's happening in communities across North America. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the film itself, but I just want to say one more thing. I am trying to find out what happened after I was born. Like, where did I go? How long was I there? You know, I want to find these things out, and I'm not having an easy time doing it. My mother's mother, my grandmother was in residential school, and we can't even get information on it because she passed away when my mother was 12. So we can't even get information about my grandmother because she passed away. And it's things that I want to know, that our family wants to know. What residential school did she go to? How long was she there? We can't even find these things out. We have to fight to get this information. I'm still waiting for information. I hope I get it soon. It's been like a few months now, but I hope I can get the information soon. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
I hope some people that've been going through problems like this have a happy ending one day. I just wanted to say this morning, this morning, turned on the news, and there was a panel. There was a panel that I started to listen to, and they had Judge Judy there. So I don't exactly remember what the question was, but she said her answer, not part of her answer, said, I have so many people that she sees, too many, that have problems and problems and problems. She said, there are so many psychiatrists, psychologists, police that don't know what to do. They can't find a cure or solve a problem with what's going on in the world. So she says, well, maybe one day we will find a cure. And I said to myself, it's Kahnawake.
Kahnawake is the great peace, and it comes to us from creation. That's why we're here. We follow the instructions, the original instructions that came to us so long ago. And all of that, the invaders came here and they tried to destroy that and tried to destroy us. And it affected the whole world. But we know the Kahnawake. Every time we turn around, they've set up a new organization that's going to speak for us. And we complain about it. We say, no, they don't represent us. And they still go ahead and they don't listen to us. They don't put anything for you to find out what's happening to us because they've got a plan. The plan is elimination of us. That's still the plan. It's called a 100-year plan. They're doing it. And nobody hears anything about us. They totally misunderstand. And every time you hear, oh, don't worry about it, we contacted the band council, who are the agents of our enemies. The whole thing has been set up for such a long time that most people, even our own people, will go along with the band council because they don't know anything else. And now it's come to this point where now you need to know the Kahnawake, the great peace. Because look what's happening to your system and your situation. You've got to learn that. You've got to see how it works. And we're staying with it and we're sticking to it and we live our life to continue to save ourselves. It's a survival thing for us, but we're still targeted all the time. And it's just awful how they come after us. It's unbelievable what they do to us. They have no pity for us. You know, what we're talking about is our children and what they've done to our children. There's no pity by these authorities. None at all. So what are we to do? What are we supposed to do? We've tried everything, and we're still, I don't know if we're getting anywhere. I don't. But we keep, every day there's something that comes up. We're attacked in some way, and we're attacked. And there's stories about us, false stories, and these are put out there, and they won't stop. So what are we supposed to do? You got any ideas how to stop this? How do you stop it?
I always have something to say. If anybody who knows me. When she talks about trying to look for, and she can't access any kind of records or anything, looking for where she's been, she wants to know so she could help put a missing piece back in her. And all these children that have been taken, they all have a missing piece. And then what happens, like that character, Elizabeth, she can't handle how she feels and she drinks. And then that carries on to your next generation. Now she has a child and she has a missing piece. So she's not whole, making her family. And that continues. And right now she's looking for a piece of her puzzle and she's not allowed to. She's not being enabled to find that missing piece. And it goes back to systems, organizations like governments, and all the rules that go along with it. She can't access it because her grandmother is not alive anymore, because she's the only one that can access records. Now, who does that protect? In my mind, the system that's out there, not my system, the Canadian government, but unfortunately she has to go through that. Those governments are set up to protect only themselves. They make it look to the public like, oh, we're here to help you, we're here to organize you, we're here to do this for you. But really, all of their rules are only made to protect themselves and whatever they can put their hands on. And that's why they need to get rid of us, because we have Ganienkeh. Now, Ganienkeh gave us that toolbox. That's a great word. It's a toolbox to help you to understand as a human being, not just a Ungwe person, a human being, what your duties are to do, to put your voice there, to put one foot in front of the other and use not what you're told. You take the facts and you use your mind, you use your eyes, your nose, your mouth, you use everything you've been given by creation to make the next move, to try and get us out of this world that we're living in. Now, one way, I believe you asked yesterday what you can do, and I don't like to tell anybody what they could do, but if you could take that movie, Rose, and if you could have a watch party at your house and have people read that book and have a discussion about it, I think that can catch fire. That can catch fire and catch fire. That's something that I could say to do with your little community of friends, and then they take it and make it bigger and bigger, because this doesn't just affect us as a Ungwe people. You're living on this land with us, and things need to be changed drastically. Now for me,
one of the things that these authorities here do you have cards for this and cards for that, and numbers for this and numbers for that. We're all a number. And so we've all been in these schools, and the Indian Day School is one of the ones that I went to. So they said, well, you can apply for some money from the government. The money, of course, is our money from the Indian Trust Fund. And so I thought, well, I'll try and get my records from the hospital. So what do you think? There's no records. From 1940, when I was born, to 1987. They looked for those records 3 times and they could not tell me where those records are. They don't exist. So what happened? Who did that? Where did it go? And then in after 1990, the Oka crisis, I needed to build a house because I was, I lost my job. I was kicked out of Indian Affairs. And I had to build a house because I had these children. And so I needed to borrow some money. And I went to the bank, and my cousin was there running it. He was the manager. And I filled out the forms, and then he called me up. He says, something really strange here. I said, what is it? So I went there to the bank on the reserve. And he said, did you know that you can't borrow money? And I said, why? Because you're dead. And you died on December, and I think it was September the 10th, 1991. I had died, and that was on my record. So, and no matter what we did, my cousin and I, we couldn't get that removed, and I couldn't borrow any money to build a house. So in the end, my cousin loaned me the money, and I built a small house for me and my kids. And I paid him back, and but anyway, I just wanted to tell you how far they will go to get rid of somebody who's a troublemaker. As far as Canada is concerned, I started being a troublemaker probably from the day I was born. But then they made me, they blacklisted me. That's what I'm talking about. You don't hear of these people who have done so much or have done anything. We all do something, and then we don't exist. How is that? How can you live? How can we? They do that to all of us. I think they've done that to her almost similar. I thought that I was the only one that had happened to. And then she told me, what, did that happen to you? And
yeah, they declared me dead too. My mother, I'm glad she didn't open my mail. They announced that we're sorry that Whitney O'Goodleaf has passed, and you owe us all this money. Well, anyways, that system needs to be dismantled. I know that sounds like a big feat, right? When I say, okay, it's everybody's job to do the right thing and try and dismantle this, but why can't you? Why wouldn't you? Everybody says, oh, Guidio, you can't do that. And why not? I got 2 arms, 2 legs, I got a brain. We went in court, and the judge says, well, why do you think you can be your own? I said, I know how to read. Like, everybody has a piece of them that can do something. And I mean, this book is an asset. Ganienkeh, the Warrior Society, it's a survival guide. If you read it, I guarantee you're gonna read it twice. But it's something that needs to be taken care of. And this is about you too. This is about you living with yourself, you living with your family. How can you not take the next step to doing something? I don't do it for money. We do it because look at that baby right there. How could you not? That's what we do this for. Well, don't really look at her right now. She's feeding him. But essentially, that's what we do it for. I do it for my children. I do it for my family. I don't want to leave this place in worse condition for my daughter to have to clean up all the garbage. She deserves to have something great too. So that's my job, is to leave. And that's what he felt his job was.
Yeah, Phil. Yeah, so I'm just thinking about both films and all the discussions we've had, to think about this process or experience of settler colonialism, which, some of us have benefited from, to think about what it actually is or what it looks like. And, we see the religious institutions, the educational institutions, the medical institutions, the legal institutions, all of which are somehow intentionally or not kind of collaborating to kind of put together this web of relationships by which, this form of domination or kind of oppression is taking place. And not only that, we see when people resist, they're criminalized, in both the film, but in reality in these recent hearings and trials, but both in the film, in the first film, there's this moment where the police is raiding Ganienkeh, and then they set up a roadblock to kind of provoke almost this conflict or something. And in the second film, we see people are criminalized just for giving birth to their own child, is this experience of criminalization. But I think there's this great moment in the first film where one of the things that they're most proud of and they laugh about is this experience of home birth that happens at Ganienkeh. And, they're talking, and maybe it's Art who's talking to the family, and they say, oh, explain, about this child and where was it born and when was it born, and the young parents are kind of laughing. And, there's this sense of pride. You can see that they're sort of rebuilding their own kind of medical practices and rebuilding schools and educational practices, legal practices of kind of self-governance away from both the reservation system, but also the colonial system. And all of that, those experiences we try to document, and people talk about it in the book. In the book, we have the original Kanien'kehá when they first did the occupation at Ganienkeh, and there's reflections from some of the people. But, yesterday, Jackie was saying that Art's daughter delivered your baby, as well. This is, yeah. So this is sort of an ongoing thing, both from the films to the book to the room right now. This kind of generational process is just being struck by everything being so present and so alive and contemporary. But, with the film from 78, they made it, but then it kind of disappeared for about 40 years, and it wasn't really in distribution or circulation. They kind of found it in the archives and re-released it a few years ago in New York, and I saw it. But it's interesting to think about this idea of property, how difficult it is to gain access to the film, and why, really, who's benefiting from keeping it locked away or so privatized or so, what's the point, really? It's not like a commercial project. No one's making money off this film. Why don't you just release it for free online so people whose histories and families are kind of documented in the film can benefit from it and share those experiences and think about these kind of the resistances that took place. And Ganienkeh, as you saw in the first film, it was quite difficult. People left. There wasn't really electricity or running water. It was quite cold. There's snowstorms, and you have multi-generation, grandparents to young children living together kind of communally to try to experiment with a new form of life, and deliver children into that world and something, and think about the courage and bravery and resilience that it took to do that, and what it still takes to kind of maintain a project like that 50 years later. But yeah, again, just thanks everyone for inviting me, including me, and I'm happy and very grateful to have been part of the book and the project and this history. So thanks.
If I could add something to that, thank you everybody for sharing your stories with us. I know it's not easy to talk about these things, and you're continuously asked to talk about things that are painful for you, and it's heavy for you to have to keep saying the same things over and over. So I just want to acknowledge my gratitude to you for once again sharing that which is painful with us. And I want to, kind of picking up on some of the things that have already been said, I want to signal to the students who are here a couple of things that you can do. Maybe I'll say first one thing I can do, which is Concordia University doesn't own a copy of Rose, so I can, as a professor, I can ask the library to buy a copy and to make sure that it's available. You know, it's still the university is a kind of corporation, but at least that it would be available for the viewing party. That was the suggestion before, so that any student could show it in any venue, right? So that will get that really important form of self-representation out there, this piece that needs to be out there. So that's something I can do. What can students do? So many students are trained to do research and to write. These are incredibly important skills right now. So the film we saw, the first film, Mohawk Nation, you probably noticed that many of the figures in the film are not named. We heard some of the names from the elders who were speaking earlier, telling us, you know, who the people were, why they're so important. But it's not obvious from watching the film. So maybe you're a film studies major, maybe you're a communications student, an art history student, sociology student. You could write about this film, and you could use your research skills to learn more about the people who are here and to tell more about their story that's not actually shown in the film, tell more about the territory that's not actually shown in the film, right? And then publish it. More and more, it's possible to publish student research. There are student journals, but go beyond that, right? Even publishing on a blog that you create yourself, it gets it out there. So that people who are looking to find out more can start with your article. This is very meaningful. It starts to build a discourse. It starts to build a critical mass of information. And all those boring lessons you learned about footnoting, this is when it matters. You footnote everything so that the people who are reading your essay can find the exact same stuff as you and go even further. So I want to make a plug. Often it feels like it's this terrible system that has oppressed absolutely everybody, Indigenous people worst of all, but everyone is caught in this settler colonial capitalist web. And saying web is actually doing a disservice to spiders, who I personally really like. So you can feel like you can't do anything, but your skills, and you've been hearing this for the last 2 days, everybody has a piece. Everybody has a piece to give. And if you're a student, you have a really important piece. We heard yesterday, Mohawk Nation News, there are over 1,000 blog entries on the Mohawk Nation News. Like right there, incredible history to write about, okay? And it's right there. And now, you know how academia loves a publication is the first one. That is the rock to stand on. These are the shoulders to stand on. So I want to just to make a plug for the students in the room to feel the fire of inspiration, because you're needed right now. We are all needed right now. So we're supposed to leave. Our time is up. There I think still a few snacks left, maybe no Timbits. I hope everyone will take something on their way out. In fact, we do have the room for a few more minutes if you want to speak to one another, and I hope you will. And students in the room, I hope you're going to take the opportunity to connect with some of the people who've come from Kahnawake to be with us today. But above all, my great thanks to everyone who has come today to share their courage and their wisdom, their language, their struggles, and we stand with you. Thank you very much.
I think on the other side, we're so grateful for what you've done. All of you, everybody that was involved in this. I don't know all the names of everybody, but we know what you did and how hard you worked to put this thing together. And thank you. Nyawakoa. Tokinigo.
All right, folks, so thank you again for coming today here to Fourth Space for the event. We are going to close it up and just kind of get set up here for the next round, so don't forget to grab some snacks on the way out. Thank you again for participating. We'll see you at the next one.